All it takes are some kind words from Bernie Sanders saying that, well, you're his guy because he really doesn't flip over the person you're challenging, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And all of a sudden, if you are that challenger to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you're on fire. That challenger is Tim Canova. He's running against her in an uphill battle, but in a very Democratic district. So normally, whoever the Democratic nominee is, he or she goes on to be a U.S. congressman or woman in this case. Of course, Mr. Canova hopes to stop that for her. Sir, very good to have you.
Thank you, Neil. Nice to be with you.
We should say at the outset we did reach out to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She thanked us for the invitations that her schedule wouldn't allow her to come on today. But effectively, Bernie Sanders has said that he's not a fan of hers, says she hasn't really been fair, and that, first of all, she's not progressive enough. You are. So he is endorsing you. Your phones began ringing off the hook. So did your fundraising. What happened?
Well, that's right. We're very grateful to have Senator Sanders' support, and it's given a good shot of energy into our campaign. Our campaign was already doing pretty well. In the first quarter, we raised over $500,000, and in the first 4 months, $1 million. And for a challenger to an entrenched incumbent, that's a pretty good start. Most folks know Debbie Wasserman Schultz as the head of the Democratic National Committee. An awful lot of people in the country see her as a failed leader of the DNC. But here in South Florida, a lot of folks know her as somebody who has been favoring special interests and ignoring her own constituents.
Well, they've elected her 7 times, right?
Well, without ever having a primary challenger in a very safely Democratic district. That does not necessarily reflect her popularity as much as very limited choices for voters.
But what I mean is she was so awful, though, at least in one of those elections, they'd throw her keister out, right?
Excuse me? They would have what?
Thrown her out.
Well, let me tell you, it takes an awful lot of chutzpah to run against her, and I didn't see anybody else stepping up to run against her.
Well, you are, and you fashion yourself as far more progressive, more in the Bernie Sanders mold than she. Well, explain the difference, some of the differences.
Yeah, sure. You know, I'd say it's more in the Franklin Roosevelt progressive tradition of the Democratic Party that includes Bernie Sanders, it includes Elizabeth Warren, and probably the greatest part of the grassroots base of the Democratic Party. And a progressive in the Franklin Roosevelt tradition was really progress for all. It was the idea of universal rights and universal duties and obligations of citizens. So it wasn't enough to just try to have a trickle-down approach to economic development and job creation, but to have a bottom-up approach where everybody has a seat at the table and there's jobs for everyone, a really full employment economy, which is what we should be shooting for.
All right, so the fact that she's going to have, I think, Joe Biden come out and do some campaigning for her, or at least an appearance on her behalf, do you read worry into that, panic, or what?
No, well, I think that's a sign of her worry. I think she is very concerned about her reelection, and she should be. On issue after issue, she's been out of step with her own constituents. And really on issue after issue, whether it's trade or payday lending and Wall Street regulation or even foreign policy and support for Israel, she's not seen as very reliable.
But let's say you're right on that. I mean, you know, there are many who disagree. We go by issue, but you know, it does carry considerable heft and influence to be the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. That's great cachet to bring back to your district. And let's say you succeeded in toppling her, not out of the question. You're just, you know, a lowly former professor who makes good on an uphill campaign. You get in there, but there goes all that juice that she had, all that cachet that she had for your district. How would you explain this?
So, Neil, I'd like to know how she's been using that cachet for this district. There are a couple of projects that might be visible that she and other members of the Florida congressional delegation have helped bring to this area. But by and large, this district is one that's not doing that well. You know, the U6 unemployment rate is over 11% now in Broward County. And I know from teaching at a university level for years now how this generation is doing, and it's not doing well. I see students who are graduating deeply in debt, paying interest rates of between 6, 7, 10, 12% on their school loans.
So you're for the government. You're for the government picking up that tab.
Picking up the tab. You know, I'm for, like I said, the kinds of programs where everybody can benefit, but everybody's expected to work and pay their taxes into the system.
All right,
and
so
that worked very well. Worked very well for this country.
Unlike Bernie Sanders, who wants to, have the rich pay more, a lot more in some cases, taxes to fund these initiatives, you would tax everybody? You think everybody should pay something in federal income tax?
Well, I'd say the wealthy are not paying their fair share of the burden.
What do you think their fair share should be?
Well, before I answer that, let me say this. We have an aging infrastructure. Why is the United States one of the only advanced countries of the world that doesn't have a federal infrastructure bank? China has one, Germany, Japan.
I understand. These are all meritorious goals. Senator Sanders has espoused. Where would you get the money, and how high would you raise taxes if you made it to Congress?
A federal infrastructure bank, if I may finish, is a way to increase economic development without raising taxes, and that's what built this country, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation.
How would it be funded?
It's essentially a revolving fund, and this is how it worked from the 1930s through the 1950s.
But how would you start the funding before it revolves?
Well, you could start it with support from the Federal Reserve, which the Federal Reserve did for Main Street interest during the 1930s and 1940s, Neil.
All right. All right, well, you have an uphill fight here. It's been done before. Do you think if you lost, would you still support the Congresswoman?
Well, you're asking me a hypothetical situation. You can ask her if she'll support me if I beat her, if I defeat her on August 30th.
Touche.
I'm planning on winning on August 30th, right. Neil.
We'll see. Mr. Canova, thank you very much. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the invite is always out there.